Hello, Jenny. What are we talking about today?
Hi, Laurie. We are going to talk about the sun's movement into Aries, the spring equinox.
Okay, the spring equinox. We are really excited for this moment because this is really shifting us, shifting the season. And this ingress is an important one. The ingress itself, ingress is just a fancy word for a planet moves from one sign to the other. And this happens on the 20th of March. Is that correct? At what time? 10:37 a.m. in Eastern time. Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to explain a little bit about just the astronomy and what this means?
Yeah, I mean, with the sun moving into Aries, Aries is one of the four cardinal signs, and the four cardinal signs refer to something similar as the four cardinal points of the compass. So when we come into the beginning of these signs, these cardinal signs, we're in for a major switch. And so in this case, we're looking at one of the equinoxes. In the northern hemisphere, it's the spring or vernal equinox. We're moving into spring. In the southern hemisphere, people are moving into autumn. So either way, it's a major seasonal shift. And I think, yeah, I mean, I guess the meaning of that is just simply that the sun is above the equator at this time. It's right at the middle of the earth, high in the sky, and switching into seasons. So
Right. Okay.
kind of summarizes it. Yeah.
Yeah, that summarizes it pretty well. You know, Western astrology is based on the seasons. It's not based on the constellations. And I think that's something that a lot of people get a little confused about. The sun is not moving through the constellation of Aries. It is moving through the area of the zodiac that is labeled Aries. And yeah, that is determined by the seasonal shifts.
Yeah, and that's a good point because that is the what's known as the ecliptic belt. That is an abstract belt that lies around the Earth that we've decided it's split up into these 30-degree increments, or each sign has 30 degrees. So yeah, so don't get confused. There's a whole nother branch of astrology which does use the constellations and is super interesting. Vedic astrology is one that uses that among others. But you're right, great point. We're doing Western astrology with it moving through the seasons.
So yeah, what Western is built on the tropical zodiac, the Vedic astrology and some others are based on what's called the sidereal zodiac. So just to kind of clarify that.
Yeah, good job.
All right, good enough.
Yeah.
Now, do you want to open up the chart now, or do you want to just talk about Aries a little bit first?
Let's talk about Aries just real quick. I mean, in a lot of ways, Aries is very simple. It's a cardinal fire sign. It's the beginning. It's the ignition, the combustion, the woomph of like lighting the kindling in your fireplace, and it immediately goes up. So it makes no bones. It moves forwards. It's highly energetic. It's not concerned about, ooh, maybe the consequences of my actions or that shit has sailed. We're doing it. The rocket is ready to blast off, and it's the moment of ignition. So we're way past, stopping to think about feelings, or we're just taking action. That's what we're doing. And it's a necessary energy. Yeah.
Fire is fast and hot. And I think of Aries, sometimes I think of like the screaming infant. It's like, here we are and we want what we want and we're not going to slow down. It's an interesting energy for sure.
Yeah. Fire's funny because it's kind of like we can all think immediately what a fire in the fireplace or a bonfire or even fireworks or all different, or candle or a lantern, or all these different ways of fire. But in a funny way, it's a little bit hard to describe because it's kind of like energy. It's just energy, force, the spark. It's very creative. It's powerful. And it really is concerned with expressing itself. It's outwardly oriented through and through. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, the cardinal signs are all really strong, and this being the fire, I like how you talk about it as the initial spark of something. And people, Aries, like all the signs, all of the signs have a more positive expression and a more difficult expression. And people tend to think a lot about Aries as the sign of war and anger and aggression. And it is all of that. And it's also, you know, you want to access the Aries part in your chart if you're in a dangerous situation, if you have to take fast action. You know, there's a lot of really good and important stuff in the sign of Aries, for sure.
Yeah, and one thing that's really interesting about fire is, I mean, fire can obviously be extremely destructive. I mean, thinking about
Yeah.
the wildfires, I mean, incredibly destructive. So the thing is about fires, there needs to be some sort of agency for control within that person. If you have a strong Aries component, you've got to
Oh,
learn
very
how to
good.
harness it and aim it. You got to learn where to focus it.
Very good.
So that's something that's really important. And when you can do that, you can channel Aries into the archetypes. So then you see the warrior, you know, the pioneer, you know, somebody like this ability, or the leader. I mean, the ability to really take charge, take the reins and move forwards. But that has to be chosen. Like that has to be, you know, controlled in a way. But it's for the person to decide how to aim it correctly. You know, so that's something that we think about with fire.
I like how you said that a lot, that need for control. So, you know, when you look at your own chart and where Aries is in your chart, that is an area where it is important to learn how to put up those controls so you don't have a wildfire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you want to share the chart now? Are you ready for that?
Yeah, why don't you pull up the chart of the moment of the ingress?
Okay.
All right, there it is.
So right
Oof.
now, so you see up the sun right there at the very top of the chart, which is actually pretty cool. This is Eastern Daylight Time, the East Coast of the United States, where Laurie and I live. And the sun is at 0 Aries, which is, it's known as the Aries point, at that
Right.
0 degrees. And that's just something that really shows up. And boy, when we move into spring here in the Northern Hemisphere, you know it. It's pretty clear.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what's showing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I always think of the sun as it moves from sign to sign, and in our charts, if we're using whole sign houses, we can see that sun move from house to house as it moves from sign to sign. I think of it as, you know, wherever it moves, it brings the warmth and the light of the sun. So it's really an area in our lives that is just heated up and emboldened in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. That's well said. I like that word emboldened to use. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, it's a good one for Aries. So
Yeah.
you gotta be bold to handle the kind of energy that Aries really brings to the table. And you've got to have those controls set, I guess.
We'll talk. Yeah.
Aries doesn't necessarily like controls, but
Yeah, and that's why, you know, inside your personality, it's like you have to be the one to manage that energy and decide, because it actually gets controlled by looking at the opposite place and thinking about other people and having consideration and channeling that energy. But one thing Laurie and I were talking about, or we were talking about before we got started, was the idea that like the sun just left Pisces. The sun was
Ooh,
just like in the spa. It was hanging out. It like hung out with Jupiter for a while, like lazing around, like just having a great old time. And then it went into, you know, next to Neptune, and it's just being kind of chilling, you know. And so it's really very, very stark to go from Pisces to Aries.
right.
And
Especially with that most recent conjunction to Neptune. You know,
yeah,
the mother of Pisces, as I think you called Neptune the mother of Pisces. And I like that. It really, yeah, the sun's been hanging out there, giving us this little blissful rest before we have to take action now.
yeah, you're exactly right. And I think that that's one of the coolest things about the zodiac. I remember learning years and years ago was how each sign kind of emerges as a response to the one before it.
Right.
So when you've been in this dreamy space with no, you know, not really with boundaries and hanging out and rest and retreat and in the
Smoking a
inner
little
work,
weed.
yeah, you know, just chilling out. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay. And now we need to move on. We can't stay here forever.
Right.
And so in some ways, this move of the sun into Aries is take a moment to think about what you want to close the door on. What do you want to
Mhm, mhm.
softly wrap up
Right,
and close the door on
right.
before you take action? That's something to, I just kind of came to my mind about it, is just
Yeah,
allow those closings. We don't talk about closing that
yeah,
much in our
yeah,
society, and
yeah,
closing things down is really important.
yeah.
And doing it intentionally and maybe with a sense of ritual can really help
Right,
you
right.
activate the
Yeah,
energies you want to activate,
yeah.
as you learn what area of your life that this sun in Aries is falling. So,
Right. And, at the same time, Mercury is still in there with Jupiter and Neptune. So your mind is still hanging out over there in that blissful spot as you're pushing forward. So it's a little bit of a dance for a while. And Mercury will follow the sun on March 27th.
yeah.
And at that point, we'll feel even more of this Aries
Mhm.
coming into view.
Well, I like how you said that, Laurie, because that just kind of brings to mind like another thing we always talk about with Pisces is how it represents a lot of the suffering that is very
Mm,
prevalent right now between the pandemic and the war and so many other environmental
right.
problems and just so on and so forth. And it's kind of like saying, like, don't forget, like, keep your mind in touch
Right.
with these things because the sun in Aries is going to allow you to take some sort of action, to do something about it. So
Yeah.
it's a really cool position to start it like that, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So, what else does the sun do during the time that it's going into Aries? I think that's always an interesting thing to think about as the sun moves into a new sign. What is it doing while it's in there? And the first thing it does is we have the new moon, which we'll be making a video about soon. That's happening on April 1st. So other than the lunar cycles, the new moon on April 1st and the full moon on April 16th, the sun really isn't doing a whole lot. The sun um, makes a conjunction with Mercury after Mercury's in there on April 2nd. And that's going to be a time where our minds are really on board with whatever action we need to take.
mm,
Um, Following that, which is 10 days later, the sun forms a sextile to Saturn, which I
mm,
think will really be a certain amount of kind of relief to the heated up sense that
mm,
we're kind of going to be in a real point of being really heated up. I think Saturn will cool it off a little bit there on the 12th.
nice.
And then on the 18th, we have just one more um, transit that the sun will be making, and that is a square to Pluto on the 18th.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that's going to be the tough point of this sun going through Aries, is that square to Pluto.
Mhm.
What do you make of that? What do you think?
Mm. Well, I really like how you said Saturn's going to cool it off a little bit because that's a sextile, and so I think of it. Saturn can be very stabilizing. So I
Yeah.
like that idea that it's like, okay, it's got a moment to stabilize, to remember the humanitarian values of Saturn and Aquarius,
Right. Yeah.
to kind of get
Yeah.
grounded again. Like, woo, what am I working on? I need to cool off, and then we come into that square with Mars, which is,
Square with
I'm
Pluto.
sorry, Pluto. Um, and woo, that's a kind of intense because when you see that in a natal chart, you think, woo, there's some real intensity here. This
Yeah.
is a person with a lot of power at their disposal if they can figure out how to access it. So I would
Mhm.
say on the mundane level, that is going to be the potential for quite a potent day. Pluto's our symbol for empowerment.
Yeah.
It's also our symbol for transformation, but Pluto doesn't mess around. Like Pluto's like, all right,
Right.
well, we'll just blow that up if we don't need that because it needs to be flattened so we can start something new.
Right. Right.
So it really has that bowl over potential. And in a square, it's stressful. It's a
Right.
square. It's going to be a
Right.
question around what things need to
Right.
be, gotten rid of in order to allow for change.
Right.
And then right after that, the sun's going to go into Taurus. So
Yeah, and that's going to cool
yeah,
things off again. There's that little piece of time between. Actually, it's a very little piece of time because the sun moves into Taurus on the very next day.
okay, yeah.
So that very last day that the sun is in Aries is it's gonna end that on a big note.
Yeah, I think, yeah. And then it's gonna, go into Taurus, and
We'll have a whole nother conversation.
yeah, because we'll be talking about Uranus. But anyway, I think that
Right.
there's a potential for some volatility that day. But also bear in mind, intentions matter, and the principles of empowerment, and the understanding that things really do need to change. It absolutely must change. And the more intentional and conscious we can be, the more opportunity there will be to make positive change, rather than just feeling like everything just got blown up.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that little sextile with Saturn really take advantage of that period. What did I say? The date was the 12th.
Mm-hmm.
It's the evening of the 12th. These transits that we're talking about right here, give it a day or two of really being potent. But then on the 12th, that's a time to really take advantage of kind of settling your system.
Yeah. That sounds good. I like the way you put that.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the sun had made any aspects to anything else, but because I wondered if it had made an aspect to Mars or Venus, but I didn't see that.
Well, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, they must be moving ahead. And I'm saying that partly because, do you see something, Laurie?
I didn't, when I ran my little list, I didn't, but now looking at this, it just makes sense that the sun would.
But maybe it doesn't quite catch up, though. Maybe those clear their way into Pisces. That's probably what happens.
Oh yeah, that must be what happens.
Yeah.
That must be what happens.
Yeah, because you and I would have caught that.
Yeah, we would have caught that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there anything else we want to talk about with this, or do we want to go into the individual impacts?
Let's just make one comment about the rulership. The sun is in Aries, so it's ruled by Mars, and Mars is in the cool your heels sign of Aquarius as well. So this just kind of says that although sun in Aries is very heated, with Mars in Aquarius, we're being asked to consider humanitarian concerns. We're being asked to consider, I don't know, a little more even-keeled or cerebral type of motivation, rather than just fire.
Yeah, there's an objectiveness to it. There's an ability to kind of separate from that incredibly personal Aries, with the Mars being in so much cooler area of Aquarius. And a more intellectual, you can think things through.
Yeah. So that's nice.
That's helpful.
Space.
Yeah.
It'll definitely be helpful. So
yeah, that'll help that square with Pluto.
Yeah.
That will. Okay.
Great. Okay.
All right.
Personal impact. Shall we?
Personal impact. Let me open up the chart that will show us with Aries on the ascendant. So if you have Aries rising, obviously, when the sun moves into Aries, it is moving into your first whole sign house. So there you have it. Your attention is on yourself. You have actions to take that are about you and how you show up in the world. What would you want to say about that?
Just bearing in mind that the first house refers to topics about self-development as well. So it's a time to think about that. In more traditional astrology, the first house was the body. So this is a time to maybe take action considering your body and your body's health and how it's doing. So it really is the self. And I guess the skill to develop here is regarding self-awareness, like simply becoming more aware of how you embody that Aries energy.
Yeah, and how other people experience you. That first house, that's how people experience you. And what you were saying earlier about Aries, the controlling the heat, really paying attention to how people perceive you.
Yeah, because you can be really powerful with an Aries rising, but you also could be destructive. So you got to pay attention. You got to tune in.
Yeah.
So how you're doing, and just be aware of how much force you just inherently have, and that the direction of your life is kind of about, leadership and pioneering things, and the more you're aware of it, the better that's going to be.
Right. Yeah. 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 Whatever's on that ascendant, it's how other people see you. But in a lot of ways, it's kind of a blind spot for ourselves, I think.
Mhm.
And being aware that people can see you in such a hot-headed kind of way.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Calm the heat a little bit, but yeah, it's a good time to take action on, like you said, self-development, paying attention to how you are experienced,
Yeah.
and do it consciously.
Yeah.
Okay, good. We ready for Taurus?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see
Your
if I can
magical
find my
questions.
little magical, okay, here we have Taurus rising.
Right.
And now this is putting that Aries sun right into the 12th house. What do you need to take action on? Where is the heat and the warmth showing up? It's showing up in the 12th house. It's really about our unconscious. It's like, listen to your intuition, listen to and intuition with Aries would be pretty loud, I would expect. It's not going to come along with a soft little whisper.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, this is an interesting placement because anyone with Aries tucked away in the 12th house, this could be, I mean, this could show up as like unexpected anger, or not thinking
Mm.
you're angry and then suddenly
Mm.
being like, oh my God, I'm furious.
Mhm.
And there's a little bit of a thing around, I also think, with the 12th house here, that you're going to have to be a person who dives down deep to really understand who you are, because that Aries energy is tucked away, it's hidden from view, and it's going to take, it's something that might happen as you get older, with
Mhm.
Taurus rising, that you're able to activate that Aries energy. And with the
Mhm.
sun moving there, this is a great time to think about it, because it's kind of like take all that Aries and like stick it on a meditation mat.
Right. I mean, it's a real time for exploring your unconscious in a determined, direct way.
Ooh, yeah. Nice.
You know, I don't know. What I envision as I'm saying that is go out and have a huge bonfire all by yourself, dance around the bonfire, and friggin' figure out what's motivating you from a real hidden place.
Yeah. I think that's very well said. Awesome.
That's interesting. Okay. Let's go to Gemini rising. Here we have it.
Hmm. So Gemini rising, that sun in Aries is in your 11th house of groups, community. This is your groups of friends. This is where you have your hopes and aspirations for other things. So this is like stick yourself in the mix of your friends. I mean, this is like make sure that you go in and allow your community to support you, right? It's that receiving of love.
And not necessarily your close friends. This is, the 11th house is, I like that you brought in the piece about your goals and aspirations. I remember having a hard time understanding this when I was early learning astrology, but, my understanding of it at this point is it's your hopes and aspirations, but it's really the people that support you to that. And
Mhm.
it's not necessarily your close friends. It's your like-minded, it's people who have the same goals and aspirations and are willing to support you to them.
Yeah. It's like your alliances, your
Yeah.
networks,
Yeah.
and letting, I don't know, it's almost like let those people reveal the warrior that you are in front of the group, I
Right.
mean, that's kind of how that
Right.
works,
Right.
you know?
Allow that community to see that strength and leadership and pioneering ability, and allow yourself to be appreciated for it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting as we're talking about Aries, and I know that I mentioned that thing about controls, and it's like, in a lot of ways, more than any other, Aries really, you do have to look at the other person. You do have to
Mm,
look opposite to find those controls, because that's where you get out of the selfishness of Aries. If
right,
you've forgotten everybody else and you're just up there for you, like, you're not going to really be able to help people, because
right,
you're in your, you're not going to even remember people because you're just all about you. And that's
right.
something that we see so much in our society, and
Yeah,
it just doesn't work.
yeah,
It's a wrong way to think about it, and to tell you the
yeah,
truth.
yeah. Absolutely. Okay. So let's go to Cancer rising. Let me,
Ta-da.
ta-da. All right.
Hmm.
Now, this is bringing the Aries sun into your 10th house, where Aries lives in your chart if you have Cancer rising. This really brings an illumination to the area of your career.
Hmm.
Who are you in the outside world? What is your overriding reputation? How do you show up out
Hmm.
in the world?
Yeah, so this is the time to start something new to
Yeah.
do with your profession, whether it's a new chapter, a totally new thing, or whether it's just a little shift that you would like to
Yeah.
make in your
Yeah.
profession.
Yeah, apply for that new job.
Hmm.
Or for a stronger position where you work, or yeah, start a program, something. It really does bring that pioneering element
Hmm.
into your career. Okay.
Yeah, pretty
Anything else
straightforward.
there?
No, I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that's a pretty straightforward one. It's your career, get to work. Okay, so next we are going to go to the one with Leo rising.
That's right.
And with Leo rising, this is bringing it into the ninth house. This is an interesting placement, I think, because it's really asking, it's really suggesting your attention move to your beliefs, or your worldview.
Mm.
It may be asking that you know you need more education, or you need a new viewpoint.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think this is where it's imperative to, I don't know, take in other people's viewpoints, take
Yeah,
in other
yeah,
cultures, take in,
yeah,
think about people you may know around you who are from a totally different place.
yeah,
And I think that we're really just trying to learn from a much broader platform than just wherever we grew up or whatever our neighborhood is. This is asking us to really broaden our mind and just
right,
take in other people's experiences. Be the warrior and picture what it would be like to walk in someone else's shoes.
yeah,
It takes a lot of courage and strength of character to do that.
yeah,
And I think that that's part of what you're being asked to do here, the
yeah,
development of wisdom.
yeah. You're really it's really bringing that warmth and light to your perspective on the world. And the ninth house can bring in issues of education or travel, because those are the places where we really broaden our understanding of the world. So this is really about broadening your perspective.
Hmm.
Okay. After Leo, we're going to find Virgo rising here. And
Oh, that looks right.
there we have it. That Aries moon is moving into the 8th house. What are we going to think about there, Jennie?
Well, I was just thinking that I know someone in the room whose Aries moon is in there. But this is
Oh,
having to really work with the kind of stuff that underlies people's maybe shining personality. This is the deeper, darker stuff that's tucked away. This is where you start bumping into each other's kind of shadow stuff or baggage, or places that are you don't talk about easily. I also think about the old designation of death and sex and taxes.
mm,
But this is also a great position for reform, like wanting to reform the things in society that are not
mm,
what they should be. So that there is a little bit of taking up the mantle as the Aries warrior to do something about um, maybe the underdog, the people who are just not really being seen, the difficult places in our society we don't like to look at.
Right. Right. And it's also, one of the things that you've brought into the conversation a lot with the eighth house is the idea of ritual.
Mm.
So with that sun moving into Aries, one of the things I think of is time to take action and do a ritual that will help you to understand some of these um, deeper complex issues that other people struggle with, and
Mhm.
your own ability to navigate that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's good. I mean, with the right, yeah, that can be a very helpful position to have Aries there so that you can just be intact as you interact with other people who are dealing with lots of different things. It could be very useful.
Yes.
So I
Yeah,
just
I
wanted to
think
throw that.
of that a lot with the eighth house is just, the necessity to understand how to navigate other people's stuff that might be totally different than your own.
Yeah.
Yeah. So go, if you've got Virgo rising, do a ritual to make sure you know how to manage yourself and keep control of that fire while you're navigating other people's deep, complex issues. Something like that. Okay. So now let's move to Libra rising.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
So Libra rising, that means that you have Aries in the seventh house. Like, I always think this is a very interesting juxtaposition because this means that on the outside, you look like a sort of friendly person who wants to have peace and have, equitable situations,
your
but then
Libra
behind the
rising. Yeah.
scenes in your one-on-one partnerships, you're like super all about you. So it's a very interesting, I mean, there's a lot to be learned from that. There's the idea that maybe you need to feel a little more autonomy in your relationship, and that's something that you're working on, or maybe that's the more positive manifestation of it. The more negative might be that you burn a lot of bridges because you're just like, you're like, forget it, I'm not going to control myself here because I am doing so many things for other people with that Libra rising. So this kind of just think about where you're at with this, like what kind of autonomy you have in your relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. I like that we're bringing in that Libra rising here, because it is so true. People with Libra rising show up in a certain way, and yet when you're in a close relationship with them, that Aries is so pronounced, and it can be such a surprise to people who initially see that Libra rising. But at this point, with the sun moving in there, yeah, it really is about taking some action on developing your own autonomy.
Yeah, and really the goal is balance, right? Like in your
Right.
relationships, I always think relationships either start super close and then you learn how to gain more independence from each other, or you start out sort of separate and you learn how to come together. And those themes are just normal balance parts of relationships. And you just got to figure out where are you at in your one-on-one relationships and
Right.
what do you need?
And they change over time constantly.
Yeah.
So, I think one thing as humans that we make the mistake is thinking things are a certain way, they're going to stay that way. Well, it doesn't work that way. Okay, so let's move on to Scorpio.
Okay.
With Scorpio rising, this is bringing that Aries sun into the sixth house. In the sixth house, day-to-day routines of self-care, how you care for yourself, dietary issues. You probably have some pretty clear determinations of how you do that stuff with Aries in that house. But that's where the sun is really bringing your attention now. So, if you need to start a new, dietary regime or exercise machine regime, not, yeah, I can't quite talk. Now would be a good time to start really taking action on that.
Yeah, and just do this fiercely. I mean, recognize the importance of your health and that your ability to, well, with the fire and Aries there, you're going to need to blow off steam. So some of your ritual or your day-to-day routines, I should say, I mean, something should be included there about that has a bit of competition to it or burns off some heat, or maybe it's more like activism. It's a cause that you're working towards. Because anybody with Scorpio rising and Aries in the sixth house, your keyword is Mars. So
Right.
if you're interested in coming to see us for a consultation, we're going to talk about Mars because it rules both those areas. So that means that you're somebody who you need to embody that quality in how you do self-care, and it's just going to be an extra important thing for you.
Yeah. I love it that you just brought the word fierceness in, and fierceness of physicality in that sixth house. And it just made me think of that movie. I think I recommended to you yesterday. First Match.
Oh yeah.
Awesome movie about a woman who I bet has Scorpio rising. Yeah. Anyway, for any of you listening, go check that movie out. It's on Netflix, and it's about a young woman wrestler, which it's just fascinating. It has
Cool.
a woman director. It's really a powerful movie. But this made me think of it. Yeah. Okay. And let's move on to Sagittarius rising. And that's going to bring that Aries sun right into the fifth house. Okay, it is time to take action and move forward on some creative endeavor. Fifth house is really, it's how we give love. It's bottom line. That's really about how we give of ourselves. And you can think about that in terms of, the old time astrologers would talk about that fifth house as children, love affairs, creativity. Yeah, it's where you give of yourself. And Aries there, you probably do it with a lot of gumption and fierceness.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I feel like the fifth house is also where you take risks. And with Aries there, you're going to be someone who risk is a helpful thing. You feeling stale, you're feeling stuck. It is time to, light it up and just really engage in some of that more fiery energy, because the Sagittarius rising, it also just means that you have the most fiery signs in the most fiery expressive parts of life. So it's important for someone like you to go ahead and get that energy out and put it, like you just said, funnel it into creative pursuits, or maybe this day you take your friends' kids mountain biking or something like that. This is like go out, have fun, be generous, be fierce.
Or after 2 years of keeping on the down low, it's time to start dating in a serious way or an aggressive way. We better use assertive, not aggressive. But yeah, that's good. Okay, so let's move on to Capricorn rising. And that's going to bring that Aries sun into the fourth house.
So that's fierce action for your family.
Or about your home. Maybe you need to build a deck.
Might be time to tear off the back porch and speaking for myself, and build something new. Don't be afraid to do it. Like, let the channel destructiveness, right? Positive destruction.
Like the fire, the control of the fire. Do something in a controlled, assertive way that's going to improve your home or something around your family. Perhaps it's time to, the other thing that we haven't really talked about here is just the courage that is demanded of Aries. Maybe there's some long lost relative that you just have always wanted to contact, but haven't gotten up the courage to do so. Maybe now's the time to take action on that.
That's a good point. I always love how the fourth house can be so simple. It's like your house, do something to wherever you live. Or it can be really profound, as in investigate the lineage that you're from. And so that's a great, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is really something to think about here. Anything to do with family. Anything to do with
family or home is the place to take action. Okay, so now we're going to move to the Aquarius rising. And that's going to put that Aries sun into your third house. What do you need to say? Use your voice. Use your voice in an assertive way. The third house is about communication. It might have something to do with neighbors or siblings or you know, those kind of relationships that are kind of simple, but can be extraordinarily complex at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, like if you're Aquarius rising, that kind of it suggests that part of your life purpose is around being in tune with these shifts that we're seeing that are tied in with Aquarius. Like we always talk about humanitarian causes, but I also just thinking about animals and the rest of the planet. It's not
Mm,
just people.
mm,
But anyway, the upliftment, the social justice issues, and so when you have that set up, like you've got a lot to say, and
right.
your words are going to be helpful,
Yeah.
especially if they're so well considered as what suggests with the Aquarius piece.
Right.
So you have something to offer. It is time to speak your word, no
Yeah.
matter how awkward you may feel or uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because that could also be a thing with the Aquarius rising. So it's time.
Yeah. And, you know, it can also be the time to start writing your book, or, you know, it's not just about speaking, it's about communicating in whatever way. So, okay, let's move on to the Pisces rising. And that is going to bring that Aries sun right into the second house.
Mm-hmm.
Second house being our own self-worth, money, resources. This is really, yeah, the courage to really develop your own personal self-worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Think about how you're spending your money, how you're making your money, your resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, it's in self-worth is something to really think about. I mean, I think probably both of us can speak to this. We see it a lot. There's a lot of self-esteem and self-worth issues in our world, and they come out in a lot of different ways. And unfortunately, like with Aries there, you might have the tendency to kind of bluster and pretend that you feel much better than you do. And that could be useful in certain situations. But also, this is also about being brave and facing those issues because it really loving the self, which is a very difficult act to do. It's a hard thing to do, but that's kind of what's going on here. There's a really profoundly autonomous, that autonomous, fierce warrior energy in that. And it might take that to work with some of those very difficult issues.
So let me ask you a question, Jennie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of trying to listen to what we're saying outside, like from a stranger's perspective, and thinking about how do you think of that second house, the link between self-worth and money and resources?
Oh, well, I feel like self-worth is the very inner. I think of the houses as having an inner view and an outer view. And the inner view is definitely get square with yourself, your own relationship with yourself, how you feel about yourself. Money, in a lot of ways, is a reflection of that deeper inner self. It's the more outer version of it. But sometimes you find people with tons and tons of money are extremely insecure, and so that's why they've done all this effort to like accumulate all this wealth because they don't ultimately feel good about themselves. And I could think of a bunch of examples that I'm not going to bring up in this conversation, but that's just one way to look at it. Or you might be a person who doesn't have very much money, but because you feel really good about yourself, like that's okay. You're not interested at all in accumulating a wealth. So your real wealth is how you value yourself.
Right. Thank you. I love that, just really getting clear about what that connection is, because it's very interesting. Our financial state and our what we own, our physical resources are very tied in with how we feel about ourselves.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think that house is a really powerful one to understand. And with Aries there, I think really, the courage to explore it with Aries there, I think is important.
Yeah.
Because like you said at the very beginning, that tendency to bluster could be really problematic. And, if you're finding that you're blustering not only about how your own self-worth, but your bank balance also, you can get into a lot of that. Now, I know I kind of went down a rabbit hole here, but I think that's
No,
interesting.
I think it's good to think about though, because it's one thing about Aries is that you have to understand we live in a world that, at least the Western world, that very much values Aries and putting energy out and expressing energy, and does not value the more yin aspects of going within and confronting your own things and being by yourself and being
Mhm.
quiet and being receptive. And those things are all considered weak. But that's really wrong, and is actually part of the reason we're in so much trouble, is because we haven't been respecting that more yin side of everything, ourselves and our society, and it's very out of balance. And so I like to think about the whole wheel of houses as there's an inner version and an outer version. And I'm a huge proponent of creating healthy relationships with yourself and really understand what that means and work with yourself in that way. And it will instruct you so much in how to work with others as well.
Yeah.
So that's sort of my 2 cents about what's funny for me talking about Aries, is it's such an overvalued energy, and it's a very important energy,
Right.
but it's also extremely out of balance.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we all
Good.
got to balance it.
All right. Okay. So I think we've gone through all of them now. So I'm going to stop sharing. And here we are.
Lovely.
We are at the end. And thank you for anyone who's still with us listening. Thank you for being here. I forgot to say at the beginning, so I'll say it at the end. You can find Jennie at hiddenpathastrology.com. You can find me at astrolure.org. Please like this video, share it, and subscribe to our channel.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Laurie.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.